Hey everyone, this is Shannie from Botanical Interests. Welcome back to my Central Florida Zone 9B garden in the month of July. Today we are going to be talking about all of the exciting crops that we can get planted in this beautiful, scorching hot month. But I am not just going to be covering my Central Florida zone. I am going to be working my way up the map. I am going to cover the entire USDA zones all the way to the far north. So if you don't hear me talking about your specific region, just stay tuned and I will get to it by the end. July. It's an insanely hot month down here in Florida, but it is for many gardeners the most action-packed, best planting month out there. Just depends on where you're at. The summer solstice has just passed, and I want to take just a brief moment to talk about the importance of solstice and what it means for your garden planning and planting. Now, summer solstice happened on June 21st. This was the longest day length of the year. And now from here on out, the days are going to become incrementally a little bit shorter. What does this mean for your garden? This means that your plants are going to ever so slightly slow their growth just a bit. And that's going to get a little more dramatic as we get farther into the fall. Your plants are not going to be growing so vigorously. They're going to be focusing on reproduction, and they're not going to be growing quite as much vegetative growth as quickly. What you can do to account for this shift is whenever you plant after the solstice, just add about a week or 2 weeks to your days to maturity projection, and that's going to give you a more realistic idea of how long your crop is actually going to take to reach maturity, because things are just going to be growing slower after that solstice has passed and the days are incrementally getting shorter. And practically, this is not hard to do. Each one of your seed packets has a DTM, or days to maturity. Just add about 10 days to that projection, and that's going to give you a more realistic picture of how long it's going to take before you're ready to harvest. And this addition of a few extra days is most critical when you are factoring in your first average frost date. So for those gardeners who are already looking towards the fall and when their killing frost is approximately expected to show up, they're going to want to add about 10 days to the label or packet's description of days to maturity, just to make sure that you've got a nice little buffer for your harvest window. It's hard to believe that we're already talking about fall killing frost, and I don't want to be a Buzz Killington, but I do want to talk about that because that is going to majorly affect what you're planting in the month of July. That's going to play a big role in your decisions. All right, let's get to the list. We are starting down here in Florida, and then we're working our way up. So I'm in a zone 9B. This is also going to cover South Florida as well. Any of you truly frost-free, super deep South gardeners, listen up. This is the least interesting month planting-wise for me as a gardener. Month of July, I'm sort of inside, hiding, maybe pinching bolted plants, weeding, putting in cover crops. I'm not doing too much heavy-duty planting in the month of July. It is just so intensely hot, and it's going to be hot for the foreseeable future. So I've got crops that I can put in. If you have a blank space and you do want to do some planting, get some cowpeas in. These are cowpeas right here. This is a little alternated crop of cowpea and cassava, or yucca. This is working really, really beautifully for this row. I've also got a sugar cane in here. Very heat tolerant, heat loving. Go for cowpeas, go for okra. Edible gourds like the cucuzza gourd or the loofah gourd, it's not too late for them. They love the heat. They'll sing right through July, August, and September and make some beautiful edible gourds for you. And you can also get some roselle in now. I wouldn't wait too much longer because you want to have it ready for fall, but you could still get your roselle planted. And that's kind of it. Only the most intense crops can handle this month. But one really important crop that we have to get started at the end of July are actually our tomatoes, eggplants, and peppers. And most importantly, the tomatoes right now. That's because if you are a Florida gardener, you are doing a fall tomato crop, or you should be doing a fall tomato crop, or fall peppers and eggplants. We can squeeze in a solid crop of solanaceous crops. Those are tomatoes, eggplants, peppers. We can squeeze solanaceous crops in the fall before we get our first projected frost, if you're planning to get a frost. For me, I believe my average first frost date is somewhere in December, if we get it. So I want to get, by the end of July, And you do not start it any sooner than the very end of July because it will just be too much time in the heat. But last week of July, you can be indoors or in a shaded protected area with trays. You do not direct seed these crops. You start them in trays in protected area, keep them regularly watered and protected from our extreme heat. Last week of July is a great time to start those solanaceous crops. If you are a big tomato lover and you've just not been able to get it right with the timing on tomatoes, living in Florida, that's really challenging. Last week of July would be the secret sauce. That is the date you really want to aim for. Some folks will start in first week of August, but I wouldn't go any farther past the first week of August. I have planted in the second and third week of August and been skunked because I got an early cold and I lost my crop before I had really gotten a good robust harvest. So last week of July, get those solanaceous crops started, start them in trays, in a shaded, protected area, keep them adequately watered. You do not want these crops getting scorched or dried out from the intense heat and sun. We certainly aren't direct seeding at the end of July because things are just not ready. The crops are not going to be able to thrive direct seeded. So put them in trays, keep them protected, and then transplant them out carefully once the fall cool weather has started to set in and you've got nice robust starts ready to go. Let's move our way up to like the mid-south, getting up into the mid and upper south. This is a great month to get your squash planted. Lots of middle of the country and southern gardeners have to pause their squash planting around the month of June because that is when the squash bug population really peaks. And some of your best squash can be planted just after that squash bug population has peaked in the month of July. So getting a late crop of squash, any kind of squash, zucchini, summer squash, or if you want to do Halloween pumpkins, now we are getting closer to that cold period, so you'd want to do an early maturing variety of a little pumpkin to get in there. But some late squash, some little pumpkins, now would be, the month of July would be excellent for you mid, upper southern gardeners. And if you are in the middle of the country, you are also now thinking about your fall garden. You're expecting to get a killing frost in the fall. You want to start thinking about that fall garden. The real tricky question you have is whether it's going to be just too hot to get them started just yet. A lot of gardeners in the Mid-South will start their heat-sensitive crops like their brassicas, cabbage, cauliflower, kales, things like that. They will start them in trays, just like I do with my tomatoes. You'll start them in trays, indoors, or in a shaded, protected area to keep them as cool as possible, and then transplant them out once the seedlings have become a little bit more robust and the temperatures have started to slack off and cool down just a little bit. That is going to be depending specifically on when you're expecting your first frost to come through. And so that is going to be very, very micro-region specific, but this is a good time to start thinking about your fall garden. And that brings me to the northern gardeners. If you're a northern gardener, you are absolutely in fall gardening mode right now. You may be in a mild summer location or you may not. And that is kind of going to determine what you can start right now as a northern or far northern gardener. You can also employ the starting the heat sensitive crops in trays and transplanting them when things have cooled down method. And that could start off in the month of July for you northern gardeners. So that's something that's applicable whether you're in the upper south or the north. If you're expecting that cold and you want to squeeze in a fall crop before a frost, you do need to be towing that line and thinking about, okay, I know that it's right now in the month of July incredibly hot, but soon enough it's going to be cooling down and I want to have my fall garden ready and prepped with tons of crops. So starting them indoors, protecting them much like we do when we protect from the cold in spring, starting them indoors and having them ready to transplant is a great trick to getting a jump and making sure that by mid-late July, you've got some little starts ready to put out into the garden maybe in mid-August. And for lots of northern gardeners, you've got a hot summer, but you don't have a killing, brutal heat like I do in the deep south. So you can still get in successions. You could be doing another succession of green beans right now. You could be doing extra successions of cucumbers. This is a glorious time of year. I know I used to grow in Rhode Island, that's where I grew up, and in July I could be sowing beets and lettuce. That is how mild my summer weather was. I could be getting in successions of cool weather loving crops. I could be putting in my fall carrots in the month of July. So it just depends on what kind of extreme heat you have over the summer or not. Keeping your plants protected with a bit of shade cloth can help. Keeping them deeply and adequately watered is essential. When you're in July and you're trying to baby along some crops to really take off for the fall, giving them adequate water is so important because this midsummer intense heat will dry them out and just kill them off. If you are a far northern gardener, you are loving the month of July. The list is expansive, what you can get in the month of July. If you are experiencing relatively mild summers up there, you can be getting lots of crops in. Carrots, beets, lettuces. Now, of course, because your last frost date is passed, you can still squeeze in cucumbers, green beans. Obviously, you're not going to do something like tomatoes, peppers, eggplants. That window has completely passed. But the direct seeded, quick to mature, cold sensitive crops can still certainly be gotten in. And definitely keep your eye on an earlier maturity variety when you're growing in the far north. You want to be able to squeeze in a good crop before you get killed off by your first average frost, which can be very early in the far north. If you're a northern gardener, keep in mind you can get several successions of radishes in. You could be doing the salad turnips. I live for some salad turnips, and they have a quicker maturity date than those longer season turnips. Instead of focusing on things like the long season turnips and long season rutabagas, get those salad turnips and you could get a few successions in during the month of July, and you'll be having a consistent harvest through the fall. I'm going to leave you July gardeners with one final tip, and this is no matter where you are gardening. In the month of July, when you are trying to select a variety, keep one factor in mind, and that is its storage ability, because you are going to be looking forward to that gorgeous fall weather when you maybe start to take your big bountiful harvest, head inside and start canning, freezing, prepping, filling up your pantry for the wintertime. So when you're looking at varieties, looking for things that are well suited to putting up and putting in the pantry is one way to just make sure that you're having an abundant harvest and something that you can really hold on to over the winter. Happy gardening!